meeting of the Brookline Select Board for January 6th, 2021. The time is 6:30. First up is review changes to the agenda, if any. I don't think that I have any changes to the agenda. Gwen, do you have any changes to the agenda?
No.
Bruce, any changes to the agenda?
No, I don't.
Joseph, any changes to the agenda?
No.
Shelby, any changes to the agenda?
Nope.
All righty. Then rolling right along, scheduled members of the public, we have none essentially other than the usual. I'll clarify that all of us are remote. I guess I'm physically in the town office, but no one else is physically here. Guy and Gwen are remote from their house, as is Bruce, Joseph, and Shelby. We're also joined by Peter Barris and the folks from Fact TV. There's nobody, like I said, nobody in the office other than me. There are no unscheduled members of the public either online or here with me. So that moves us right along to approving the minutes from the December 16th regular meeting. The only things that I had, Peter, under the who was present, Shelby was present. You just need to add her.
Got it.
And then really the only other thing that I had that mattered, I suppose, was down under minutes, the minutes from December 9th at the very end, there's 2 all in favors. You can just delete one of them.
Wasn't Bruce there?
Yes.
No, Bruce was not there
Oh, well, I mean, at the meeting, no, I wasn't.
at the meeting, yeah. So you were correct to leave him out, but we just need to add Shelby. And then the only other thing that I wanted to change was down on page 2, under pay orders, the one line where you say Mr. Jones had signed the warrants last week. Can you just change that to Mr. Jones had signed the payroll warrant last week? Because I only signed the payroll warrant, not both warrants. Gwen, did you have any other changes to the minutes other than what I did? Joseph, any other changes to the minutes other than what I mentioned?
No.
Shelby, any changes to the minutes?
Nope.
Bruce, I know you weren't there, but did you notice anything that you thought should be changed?
There's a couple of spelling errors, but I didn't bring the sheet down to me.
Let's leave.
I don't have it on me,
Okay,
so
that's cool.
we'll get past that.
Okay. Okay, then I'd like to make a motion that we approve the minutes from December 16th as amended. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Seconded by Gwen. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of approving the minutes from December 16th as amended signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions?
I suppose I should abstain.
Yep. Okay, so it's approved with 1 abstaining. All right, those are good. Then moving on to the one item of new business, although it's kind of old business as well, town meeting ballot structure and process. So I guess you and I exchanged an email about this guy, but I guess I'll ask you for everyone else's benefit. The webinar that Will Senning from is he from the Secretary of State's office?
From the elections division,
From
yes.
the elections division,
Secretary of
whatever.
State's office, yes.
Yeah. So he did a webinar and you were able to attend that webinar.
That's correct.
But I guess not to speak for you, I guess I'll let you say, was there anything illuminating that came out of that we didn't
Basically, it was a
know?
PowerPoint presentation that they read off, and it was pretty much all the information that we had already seen. And they were also, waiting to hear whether the legislation, which is supposed to meet this week, has changed anything, so that may impact what we're doing going forward. But at that point, it was the same thing, business as usual. A few questions were asked, but pretty much the same questions we all have.
Have you heard anything? I have to admit that I don't think I heard any news today other than the obvious news.
No,
Yeah, really.
No, I have not heard
Has
anything.
anybody heard anything whether the legislature has a plan to?
The legislation has it on the top of their list, but whether there's going to be anything done immediately is still to be seen. But it appears that they're aware that there's something that may have to be done, and they are looking at it.
Okay. But I guess to recap what we are from our discussion last time, I mean, I guess I could imagine most of what I've heard speculated that they might do. You know, I think we all discussed, and I think we were all in agreement that most of those things wouldn't necessarily help us. The idea of changing town meeting is not something that I think is appealing to any of us, because it could only potentially put us in more of a hole. The one thing I could envision them doing, whether they will or not, and whether they'll do it soon enough to be able to help us, I don't know, is whether they might waive some of these date requirements that we're under to complete certain steps of the town meeting process. Because I guess the thing I'll say is, at the moment, to recap some of the stuff we talked about last time, at the moment, you know, unless we're going to schedule a separate special meeting, we have to vote our warning at our January 20th meeting, which means we need to know by that January 20th meeting, you know, in advance of it a little bit at least, so that we can form the warning with all the names. We need to know the names of anyone who has nominated themselves for any of the positions that we're going to be voting on through this ballot. We also obviously are going to need to know the final amount for taxation purposes. We're going to need to know a lot of details, some of which we currently don't know. If they were to change, and that's because we are required currently to both approve and post the warning between 30 days and 40 days prior to our town meeting. So less than 30 days before the town meeting is too late for us to have the actual warning posted, which means, of course, we have to vote on it prior to that or at the same time as that. So I guess the biggest question in my mind, and Guy, I don't know if you have, in some of the discussions you've had with the Newfane town clerk or any other town clerks or whatever, to know, okay, is there a process that what's the process we have to go by to get people nominated for these positions so that we can include them in the warning?
Okay, the bottom line is they have to sign a consent of election form, which I'm prepared to upload tomorrow onto the website. So those who are interested in running for an office will have to sign that consent. That's the biggest issue. And like you said, there's some things that hopefully may or may not happen this week up in Montpelier. So I'm not sure. So we're kind of in a holding pattern at this point, as far as deadlines and so forth. I'm hoping that they will relax some of the rules, as you are, and maybe something will come of this. But at any rate, the bottom line is that we have to have whoever is interested in running for an office sign a consent form. And that I will put on the website. They can download it, sign it, and then give it to us or somehow get it to the town clerk's office to the town clerk's office, and we can go from there. There's apparently, obviously this is all new to us, and there's going to be some mistakes, but I think we basically know what we have to do. We have to we have to create a ballot with all the articles that we need on, and the people who want to be elected need to sign a consent form. That's pretty much the Reader's Digest version.
Right. So the other
Dave?
thing is that at the moment, and then we'll open this up to everybody else just to talk a little bit about that, although I'm not sure that it's going to change anything. At the moment, unless they change this, the state requirement is that people have to complete that consent form by January 18th, which is 2 days prior to our next meeting and less than 2 weeks from today. So I guess we also need to, well, either we need to gamble on the fact that some of these deadlines will be changed, and or we need, because we've never done this before, presumably nobody in town, unless they've stayed completely raptured by our ongoing discussion of this, has any idea what the process is for them to nominate themselves, or that they have to nominate themselves in advance. So do you want to, as the person who is going to be responsible for the election, I guess, does it make sense for you to send out an email blast, and should we post something elsewhere? How do we get the word out to people about exactly what positions are going to be up for election, so people know what they may or may not want to nominate themselves for, et cetera?
Right, I agree with you, David. I think we have to get as many people informed as possible. One of them can be from the Front Porch Forum. The other is through the Julie's listserv.
Yeah.
And like I say, this is so unique to us, and it's kind of caught us by surprise. But we have to do the best we can. These are the cards that we're dealt with, and we have to play that hand. I will have the consent form out on the website, like I said, and people who are interested will have to download it. In the event that we have no anybody looking for an office, then the select board at their organizational meeting will either one have to appoint them themselves or leave the office vacant.
Open, right.
Right. I guess, but even beyond that, let's keep in mind, because we're going to be doing this by Australian ballot, it's entirely possible, and I would argue maybe even likely, that if there are positions that no one has nominated themselves for that position, I bet we're going to get write-in people for that.
No doubt.
People write in for that. Now, granted, that doesn't obligate a person to fill that position, but we're then going to have to deal with the fallout of that.
Yeah, it's a can of worms, to be honest with you, David. But I think we'll start with getting the consent forms. And by the same token, I think all of us, select board, all members of the office staff, must reach out and try to contact people who are already serving and see if it is their wish to serve again, so that we can get at least their name on the article, on the articles to be elected. And if we do that, I think that will save some aggravation.
Okay, hang on one second. So somebody just joined? Who just joined the call?
Mark, Bill.
Oh, hey, Mark. How you doing?
Good, how are you?
Good. Guy, then, are you going to send out the communication to people explaining that they have until January 18th to complete the form and submit it if they want to be nominated, and detailing what positions are open to be nominated or whatever.
Right,
open for people to nominate themselves.
I guess we should have some sort of a meeting of some sort to make sure that the people that we're asking are in fact interested in running again. You know I will be interested in running for town clerk, and I'm sure that Mike Masters will be interested in running for treasurer. Those are the important things. The select board is also important. I think I'm more interested in making sure that our key roles in town are addressed initially.
Right. Well, I guess the problem though with that is that if I think from a transparency standpoint, remember this is by doing this is taking the place of an open town meeting.
Yeah.
Where the moderator would say to everyone who's attending the town meeting,
nomination?
do you want to nominate someone? Would open nominations for things.
Right.
So while I agree with you that maybe at the same time, we need to be talking to everybody to make sure that people who are in existing positions want to continue or whatever, the town has a right to be made aware of the fact that they can nominate themselves for any of these positions.
Yes, they
and
can.
that has to happen in some form of communication, I guess.
In the real world, in an Australian ballot situation, candidates would go out and ask people to vote for them and so on and so forth. So for us, this is literally different. There would be signs, they would have meetings, they would ask for their support and so forth. But with us, this is a little different because we're going from a town meeting floor vote to an Australian ballot. And I guess we're going to have to do the best we can. And yes, I think we need to send out some sort of message informing the public that the town will have an Australian ballot for town meeting, if that's what the town has finally agreed to. I saw something on Front Porch Forum that I wasn't sure was correct. But at any rate, we need to send out some sort of message.
Sorry, I just want to clarify. I mean, we voted at the last meeting.
Right. And that's
to
what I
have
thought.
an Australian ballot. So
okay, so then that's a given.
Yeah, right.
All right, so then now we have to go to the next step and say, okay, who is willing to run? We don't have the opportunity for people to go out and talk to other people. They can, but the bottom line is that we will have probably some write-ins. And like I say, the key positions are the ones that I've spoken with: the town clerk, the treasurer, listers, select board. Those are pretty much the key things that keep our town running well. The other things I think we can live with, but again, this is a decision that the select board is stuck with because of the times and places that we are at this point.
Right.
Dave?
Yeah, Shelby.
Does anybody else get a word in here?
Hang on a second, Bruce. Hang on. We will.
I'm hanging on.
I think to start off, it's not really that complicated. We just have to get the list. There's the list on the website of all of our elected positions and the terms they expire. So I think we just need to consolidate that, list the position, how many years the term is for, and send that list out with the information about how to self-nominate and an attachment to the document. Do that to the listserv and post similar information to Front Porch Forum at our posting sites, and then all of us just try and share the information and to anyone in town that we know. But I think it's really as simple as that, to try and gather as many names as we can. And obviously we can't control who's gonna actually respond. But I think if we just create a quick little blurb about how the process works, attach the document, and have this compiled list of what positions are available and what the time commitment is if they were to be elected, that's the best we can do, and be available for questions.
All right, Shelby, would you like to take on that?
Do that, Shelby?
I am literally doing it right now in an Excel sheet.
Okay. All right, that's great. And then you'll send that out, and you understand what the steps.
Yeah, as long as I get the document from, if Guy, you can send me the document that you said there was already a document. Is it online, or do you have a specific one?
I will upload it tomorrow morning around 9:30. And it'll be on on the front page of the website on the bottom underneath the documents, and it'll be right there. And you can
Perfect.
download it and you can print it and you can have someone do whatever you wish to do with it.
Yeah, so I'll finish the list of what I think what looks like are all the open positions. I'll send it out to you guys. So if anybody sees a major goof up that I did, but I'm going to try and I'll be as thorough as I can. And then when I get that document in the morning, I'll send it out to Julie and post it to the Front Porch Forum to start off.
Just for your information, Shelby, all the contact information for everybody, all you have to do is click on their name and that will give you their email and so forth, whatever you need to contact them.
Yeah, so so I can just send out a BCC. I'll BCC all of the current elected officers with the information. So if they want to re-up themselves, they'll have the information to do that.
Okay. Okay. Thank you, Shelby, for taking that on. Okay, let's just talk about this step of the process and just make sure everybody understands and is comfortable with this and doesn't have anything else. Bruce, do you understand what we're doing here, and does it make sense? From
Yes.
your standpoint?
I had a question. We went past what I wanted to ask because we went on. So I had a simple question. Do I understand correctly that we as a select board have the option to change the town meeting date?
No.
Not currently, no.
Okay. Then never mind. Yes, I do understand.
We had a little bit of a discussion, just to fill you in, Bruce, at the last meeting when we voted to make our town meeting by Australian ballot. We also
Right.
had a discussion about the possibility that the legislature has said that they might give towns the ability, select boards the ability to change the date of town meeting.
I saw that.
Our discussion, I think I can speak for the other three people who were participating. We all felt that changing, unless we knew for sure that everything would be perfect again by April 5th or something, it would be one thing. But the fact that we don't know when a safer environment will necessarily be in the short term, and all delaying our town meeting would do is potentially, if positions go unfilled or, God forbid, the budget gets voted down, things like that, it just gives us less time to be able to react to anything.
Okay.
So really,
okay. What I was going to was initially when you started talking about this, and you're talking about the warning and you're talking about the deadlines and everything, I was starting to think to myself, well, if we can move the town meeting a week or two, if we have an issue with everything you've been just talking about in terms of deadlines, in terms of getting people to react. I know the time meeting before that, there was discussion about having an information meeting about the warning. So that's the only point I was trying to make, is if we were in the position, if we felt we had to, we could move it back a week or two if we felt that we were pressed.
Yeah, and at the moment we don't have the ability to do that. And unfortunately, if we wait to see if we might get the ability to do that, all we're really doing is just losing time. And in a way, the reality is it's going to have to happen fast regardless. So my view, and I think most people's, is why not just bear down and get done what we need to get done so we can have it when we know we need to have it, and make the best.
And then react accordingly. Yep. Okay.
Gwen, does the approach as far as publicizing what people need and moving towards this date, does that all make sense? Do you have any concerns about that or questions about it?
I understand. No questions, no concerns.
Okay. Joseph, how about you? Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, I got a couple things to kind of add on to that. It all makes sense, and I agree with everything. The big thing that I would say maybe we could do in addition to everything Shelby and Guy said is if we use that sign that you have, Guy, and just have write something on it to bring attention to the fact that we're doing an Australian ballot and direct people to the website. That'll catch a lot of the people that don't maybe that aren't on the list.
Well,
of Front Porch.
unfortunately, that sign isn't very user-friendly and it doesn't allow you to put too much information. But I think by going on the website, by going on the Front Porch Forum, and also by going on Julie's listserv, I think we should be able to reach somebody. We may also consider putting a blurb in the Brattleboro Reformer. So, you know, which was newsworthy. So it's not an ad. It wouldn't cost us anything. Possibly I could get a hold of Bob Audette from the Reformer and see if he's willing to do something like that for us.
Yeah, that's an excellent idea. Is the sign so tough to use? I mean, I'd be willing to try to change something, even if we just said town meeting, Australian ballot, the date, and see
It
website.
would all have to be abbreviated.
Yeah, okay, well,
it's
you're welcome to come down there and play around with the sign. Like I say, it's somewhat restrictive, but if you can come up with some sort of thing, I'd be more than happy to put the sign out for you.
Okay. I guess I'll talk to you after that.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea, Joseph. I agree, because the reality is that we do have people who aren't going to be on the email list or see Front Porch Forum, and just are driving around town. And if there's some way for us to just put a sign out that alerts people to it, that seems like a really good idea.
Or even
David,
We do
one
it for
quick question.
elections. We tell people when there are elections, and honestly, this isn't, this.
One quick question,
this is that
David.
way as well.
One quick question. In the town report that we're going to send out, would it be advantageous to put a front page notice in the town report saying that the town will be having an Australian ballot? So hopefully that should go to everybody in town.
Well, we can, and I think we will, but the problem is, of course, by the time anyone will get the town report,
it's
the
already
time
over.
will have, it will have the warning in it that will already include all of the information that's been pre-decided.
Right.
So there's a few things here. One is, again, people, because we're not going to have a physical town meeting where people can freely nominate things, they have a right to know before the nominations are already finalized that they could have nominated themselves for something. Not that I think there's a ton of people in this town, based on prior experience, who are going to nominate themselves for things, but it doesn't mean that they still don't have the opportunity.
How many select board?
And the reality is, by the time, in all likelihood, because of how far behind under the gun we're going to be on a whole bunch of other stuff, we're going to be very pressed to get the town report to people even before the town meeting happens, let alone before the informational meeting, which is really the time that they have the opportunity to ask questions, which is going to be 10 days before that. I mean, we can put information and make people aware of the fact that they're going to vote at town meeting, or they're going to vote Australian ballot. But if they want to have any kind of input whatsoever, we're going to probably, waiting for the town report is going to be awfully late to do that.
Yeah, I was just looking for any outlet possible to get the message out.
Yeah, well, because basically, I mean, the warning that we place, that we vote on in 2 weeks' time, that's going to be the main portion of the town report. And we can certainly emphasize all over it the fact that it's being done by Australian ballot. I mean, it'll basically be the ballot, I guess. I don't know, we'll have to figure that out too, because we've never done that either.
Hey, David, I have one more.
Yes, sorry, Joseph, I sort of sidetracked that.
And this is kind of part of the agenda setting, but I figured we might as well get ahead of this. Since we're so far behind on everything, I think it might be a good idea just to say that we should have a special meeting for nominations and for the creation of the Australian ballot.
I agree.
I mean, obviously the 20th only 2 weeks from now. And so it might be best for all of us just to say we should have a special meeting on the 13th is what I would propose. Even if it's brief, it might be helpful.
Yeah, I don't disagree. The one thing I'll say, of course, is that, yeah, I mean, we can, I mean, and I think we'll probably, honestly, when we get to the budget discussion, if nothing else, I think we're going to still need another meeting to finish that. But yeah, we could, I'm not opposed to doing that to figure out how we form this. Guy, one question that I had related to that is, have we gotten any kind of example from any other town on literally what their ballot looks like? And
No, only
when they do it?
because I spoke to Anita at Townsend and I spoke to Carol in Newfane, and both of them, you know, they had a town meeting where the town meeting, half of it was done on the floor, and the other half for voting for office and so forth has always been an Australian ballot. And again, people would go out and poll and you know, recruit and so forth. So that's what I'm saying, you know, that's a little different for us because this is unique to us.
Right, but at the end of the day, they had a ballot that they used
Yes, right.
for people to vote
And
on.
basically the ballot was just for the officers. And I want to say maybe the budget was on there. If I can, I will get a copy of it from both of them to see what the differences are. I'd be more than happy to do that, and I will scan it and send it to everybody. Or if it's too big, I will have it in the office and we could have it for the next meeting. But I'd be willing to do that and see if we can formulate some sort of decent ballot for this, because this is so unique. I mean, we're literally putting the whole warning on an Australian ballot.
Right. Right. And we still have, yeah, we're going to still, so while we're on the subject of it, I'm in agreement with Joseph's idea of having a special meeting next week to hopefully just focus on the ballot and maybe trying to nail down some of the details of exactly what the warning and the ballot need to look like. Because we do, like we say, we have some requirements about when we have to have those done.
Okay, I will.
Pretty fast.
I will have them.
Guy and Gwen, are you okay with having a special meeting next week?
I'm fine with it.
Wednesday,
Yeah.
what is the date next Wednesday? The 13th? The 13th at 6:30. Bruce, are you okay with that?
Yeah, I think so. It would help take pressure off. That would be a good idea.
Yeah. Shelby, are you okay with that?
Calendar
Yep.
right there.
Okay. So let's plan on that, and I'll warn that.
Looks small, maybe.
Maybe he's sitting somewhere else.
That's a good idea, Joseph. So I guess I'm trying to think of, at the moment, what, I mean, the other thing, I guess, in a week's time, maybe something will have happened in the legislature that will have changed or alleviated some of the pressure, possibly, maybe not, but whatever. In a week might be different. Shelby, I guess before we move on from this, has anybody else got any thoughts or any other things that you think we need to try to figure out at the moment about the ballot process? Gwen, we'll go around.
No, other than kind of a brief thing of how many positions are open to help Shelby out, because that chart isn't necessarily some, like the listers. We know that
Marcia and
Sheila is not going to be a lister. She does not want to be a lister, and Marcia is considering resigning. So there's listers that we, even though they're still there, I don't think they're going to be there.
Well, but that doesn't, I mean, okay, so there's a few things to clarify about this.
they have to quit.
I mean, according to the terms that people have been elected for, let's just go down
Okay.
the list, because I've actually
Yeah, I
written,
understand. All
I've
right,
written it
got
down. So let's just go through the list real quick. And maybe this is helpful for you, Shelby, maybe it isn't, but town clerk is up for election. Town treasurer is up for election. Collector of delinquent taxes is up for election. There are 3 select board positions. Gwen's, the one Gwen is currently in, the one Joseph is currently in, the one Shelby is currently in. All 3 of those are up for election. There is, based on the terms, 1 lister position,
Right,
which is Don Goki's.
right.
Now, if other people choose to resign or aren't, I don't know
Right.
about that. I've not been notified of any of that. So
Right. No,
we're not,
the town-
we're not going to put out positions that are not.
Right. Right.
So there's 1 lister, there's 1 auditor position that's up for election.
Which auditor is that? Do you know? Frank, there's
Heidi.
Frank.
Yeah, I don't
It's
know.
Heidi
Is
Nystrom.
it Heidi? Yeah.
Oh,
I
okay.
didn't write down names. There's 1 cemetery commissioner.
Just to clarify quick, what's the term on that? 5 years?
Yes.
That's what it looks like.
I think so.
Yeah, 5 years for cemetery commission.
Now, there are things like, and this is something that I guess we need to get some clarification on. I mean, are we still doing the constable
No.
election situation?
No.
Are we no longer even going through the motion of
No.
putting
Well, I
that
think
out?
it's actually technically an open position that people could nominate themselves for. So I think we
Well,
sort
I'm
of
not
have
sure that
to.
I'm not sure that it actually is, though.
Oh,
'cause
it's
I think we
okay.
had some discussion at town meeting
Right.
in the past that that's not actually necessarily something
Because
that
of the
somebody
training
can
and
be
so forth.
nominated for. And so, but I don't know, quite frankly, whether we're.
I'll
whether
touch
that's
base with
something we should be
VLCT.
doing. So that's a question mark, I guess. The
I will
trustee
call
of public
VLCT.
funds. Okay, thanks, Guy. The trustee of public funds is up for election, as every year. The town agent, the town grand juror.
Moderator.
Well, no, there's no moderator election because
Right.
there is no moderator because we're not having a meeting.
But I think you still would have to have a moderator.
Well, we will at the informational meeting. Well, I'm not sure that we actually will have a moderator at the informational meeting.
Okay,
Because the informational meeting is actually a meeting of this board.
right,
I
the
think-
select board.
I think we can probably suggest that we have Dave Parker and that we nominate and do that, but I don't know that we're even necessarily required. But that'll again be happening before anybody votes on anything.
Yeah,
So I think that might be all of the positions. I'm pretty sure that it is.
yes, the rest are all appointed by the select board.
Exactly. They're either appointed or they're elected separately. Like the jail.
What about the school district positions?
The school district position, we voted last year. We elected Leanne to a 3-year term. So that's not up for reelection.
Oh, okay. Sorry. On the website, it was still for expires 2021.
Yeah, that I don't know about. I mean, I know that she was nominated and voted for a 3-year term based on it. We warned it as a separate article last year for that.
Okay,
Now-
cool. So I'll take that off my
Now
list.
that assumes also that the school board and the school doesn't throw some wrench into all of this by telling us
Yeah,
at the last minute that there's something we're supposed to elect. I like to believe that won't happen this year, but I guess we'll find out. So Shelby, I am quite confident that that's the definitive list. One thing I'll say, I know, Shelby, that you mentioned putting something in there about what the role is, and you might have even said something about like time commitment or things like that. do not think that that's.
No, I was just saying that we should list the term. That's all, or the term
Okay.
length. That's it.
Yeah.
No.
Okay.
I think if they
Okay.
have questions, they can research it or reach out to one of
Exactly.
us and ask.
Perfect.
But I was thinking just list the number of positions and the
And how many
term length
years
for
it
the
is.
open positions. Yep.
Perfect. Awesome. Thank you. So sorry. So continuing just to wrap this up, maybe Bruce, does this all make sense? Any other thoughts about the meeting until we reconvene and discuss it more next week?
No.
Joseph, any other thoughts from you or?
No.
Okay. Shelby, how about you?
No, just how does everyone feel real quick about me putting a quick note about the meeting next week in the information we're sending out? So if somebody does have questions, they can try to come to us during that forum.
Not a bad idea.
I don't think anyone, I doubt people will, but I'm just one, there might be somebody who just wants to have touch base quick or hear more about what it means to actually be on the ballot. I don't know. And it's still within time for them to make up their mind after the meeting. I know we post it, but I just didn't know if it'd be helpful to put the information that the meeting's happening next week with the information we're sending out.
I think it's a good idea.
Yeah, I think it's a good idea.
Sounds good.
Okay, cool. All right. Then that all makes sense. And then we'll reconvene for more discussion about this and hopefully nail down some more details about things next week on that. Okay, moving on to old business building update. Bruce, if we could be.
Okay, I have a few things, but not a lot.
Cool.
We had some heating issues at Susie's, which has been stabilized. You'll notice a really large bill from Scott Bovat. That was for $2,100. What you're probably not privy to the breakdown, or you'll see it in. No, you won't see it in the pay orders. But it was basically $1,700 in parts. We're welcome to the world of complying with Section 5 of the lease, which means that we have to keep potable drinking water in the place. And that's a different discussion for a different time. But just saying that's been stabilized. The heat's been stabilized. That we had some issues with the thermostats and the zone valves, and Pete Noble came in and helped me straighten it out. And he's making another visit within a week because he's not too happy with the pumps, and he's calling the manufacturer to see if he can understand more about how the pumps are supposed to. He's getting the signals, reading it, but presently it's the heating system stabilized. I went into the building Saturday to check around and make sure everything was stabilized and was. I was disappointed to see in the preschool room the panel that has the access to upstairs to the heat exchange, to the exchangers upstairs, which we in the past in the winter have kept open a little bit so we let a little heat up there, so we haven't had a freeze up. We've only had a little bit of single digits weather so far this year, but at the end of the month, we're going to be down to single digits probably for a while if Weather Channel's correct, but that's never a guarantee. Anyway, they had closed the panel. I reopened it. I haven't talked to Olivia about it yet, but I plan to, and ask her to please keep it open. We really don't want any more freeze ups. We've had this problem 3 years or more, and we're putting an end to that. I've told Scott Bovat that from time to time we might call him in on plumbing issues. So I'm trying to take a little bit better control over the expenses and the work that's done on the building. He's agreed. He's given me some advice. I was going to get somebody to take care of the propane furnaces individually, like somebody like Rick Perkins. He advised against it and thought that I should go to a company like Code and Coda, Dead River, or Sandry, and I took it upon myself to call Sandry, and something for us to consider. We can get a plan to take care of, and this is actually shout out to Guy because this is really Guy's idea. I did call Sandra. Guy did talk to Kathy. I did talk to Barbara Green down there, and we can get a service policy for that boiler for $195 a year, and it also covers the servicing of the boiler next year when we have that coming. So it's something we should consider. We don't have to do it right this minute, but I'm trying to differentiate the responsibilities individually rather than having one person do 2 or 3 different things, which is what's been happening in the past. So just to reiterate, and I'll be done. Scott Bovats, I've got taken care of the plumbing and the water system. The water system is beautiful. He straightened it all out. It was a mess. He straightened it all out. It's fine. And a lot of it had to do with maintenance, change of sensor, bulbs, etc. That's done. Peter Noble has stabilized the heating system, and we just got a little bit more tweaking to do to straighten out some air hammering, and that'll be done. And as far as the gas furnace, that's okay. It's been serviced. No issues at this point, and we can consider down the road whether we want to do a service plan or not. But I think last point is I think I've concentrated too much on worrying about whether they have to close their doors or not because of an issue. Well, I went back and read, I think it's section 16 of the lease, and if they have interruption because of a heating issue, we're not going to spend, I don't see the point of us spending lots of money to rush somebody in there to fix it when I can get somebody within 24 hours to fix it. And in the case of the boiler, they're on 24-hour call. So if we have any issues with that, we can get them in right away. So that's what I've done, and I'm pretty pleased with the way things are going at this point, but nothing's perfect in that building. That's it.
Can I add something, David?
Yeah.
With the contract I know with Sandry, the contract is when the date you started, that's the start of the year. So if the select board, if the town is interested in creating that sort of contract with them, they don't have to wait for a certain term. If they wanted to start tomorrow, the contract would be good from tomorrow for 1 year, just so you
Correct.
know that. Okay.
Correct.
Yep.
Okay.
Correct. So we have to decide. We don't have to decide this minute, Guy, everybody else. But I think it's a good deal because it cost us $500 to have the damn thing serviced last October, and it's going to cost us at least $200 to have it serviced next year. So for $195 and have on call and have discount on labor and 15% discount on parts, and it's a win-win situation for this town.
Okay. All right. Yeah, that's something we can, once we get through this little stuff.
Doesn't have to be right this minute, Dave.
Okay.
I'm done.
Anything else, Bruce, or is that it?
Nope, I'm done.
All right. Thank you.
Mhm.
Okay. Moving on to other updates. Mr. Tanza, how's stuff going?
Okay, just to let the townspeople know, we have started selling dog licenses. And the bottom line is that we're doing things by appointment. But if the residents just wish to drop a check in the back door with their rabies certificate, if it has expired, and the fees are the same as last year. If they go on the website, the fees are listed. We've updated the website with all the fees. That would eliminate a lot of people from coming in the office, and we would be more than happy to mail out the tag, the license, and so forth. They have until April 1st to do that. Other than that, the office has been relatively busy with researchers and so forth. There's a lot of refi going on, but everything seems to be under control. And Gwen is constantly scanning the record books. So we're in good shape at this point.
Awesome. Thanks, Guy. All right, moving on to highways. Mark, how's it going with you?
Okay, first of all, I apologize. The last select board meeting, I did try to call in through Zoom, tried multiple numbers for over an hour, and they kept telling me that the meeting had not been started yet. So for some reason there was an issue, couldn't get through, but it worked fine tonight. So Basically, we had the big snow and then the rain came for Christmas Day, and we did receive some erosion issues throughout town. And I've been working with Archie Clark on the road repairs. And I know that the road repairs didn't happen immediately, just due to lining up trucks and equipment and gravel. So we have repaired. I've been getting some phone calls and some emails, and I've addressed most of those. And we have a plan to meet tomorrow. Tomorrow morning, we're going to go around with gravel and try to address all the other issues that had arisen from the erosion problem. So, also to back up again, I know that you were going over the budget, and I had talked with Archie, and as you all know by now, we decided there was no change in the numbers that we needed to do for the road part of the budget. And so I know that Archie was going to be in contact with you, Dave,
Yeah,
to discuss that.
Yeah, we did.
Right. So I don't believe there's anything else that's been going on other than just working with Archie on the winter road.
Just a quick question, Mark. I see a bill for $3,451 for winter storm damage. Did you call Wyndham Regional Commission to apply for that FEMA grant that was available? I don't know if I lost you.
Oh, I think
Bill's is apparently disconnected.
Yeah, we just
I
lost
think I
him.
saw him drop.
Seems to have
You
dropped
scared
off.
him.
Yep, he's no longer in the call.
Okay. Well, apparently there's a FEMA grant that was being offered by Wyndham Regional Commission, or some information that if we had notified them, I'm looking at this bill of 3451, which is substantial for winter storm damage,
Yeah.
and it may be covered by a grant at Wyndham Regional.
All right, so maybe that's, well, we'll try to see whether
Okay.
whether we've missed the opportunity of that or not. I guess I don't know. We can. My guess is no, because I think Mark would have mentioned that if he had. So, all right, and Mark's gone. I guess maybe he'll join back in. If he does, we could see if he's got anything else. Otherwise, we'll assume that was it for him. Okay, moving on to communications. Email, just a couple things, I think. One is that there's I can't remember whether I mentioned this at the last meeting or not, but there's an Act 250 application that was submitted for splitting a property up on, I think it's on Purple Mountain Road.
Yes, that was for the Wilson Cemetery.
Yeah, partly in Brookline and partly in Dummerston, I guess actually part of it is, or something.
Yes.
Anyway, the Planning Commission, I think as we discussed, the Planning Commission took a look at it, and they all concur that it, and I think Tom had a discussion with you guys as well, that it all seems very cut and dry to them. They don't see, it's basically just sort of dividing so that there's access to a family cemetery.
Right.
Doesn't seem to be anything that the town needs to be concerned about, or any abutting landowner.
Not at all.
Concerned about. There were a few emails that came through today that ANR, I think, is delaying something about some input on it, although there's still no indication that anybody from the state or anywhere else has any concerns about it. So for the moment, neither us as a select board or the planning commission really needs to do anything further on that. So that was one thing. And then, another, which I guess I'll put aside and we'll discuss when we get to the budget discussion, of the appropriation request that we received through email last week or a couple of weeks ago, and whether we want to add that or not. So I'm going to put that with the budget stuff though, so we can talk about it when we go through budget. All right, that was it for emails. Regular physical mail. One thing I want to note is we got a gift. Each of us has received a gift from Gary Livornia. And anybody who's on the online can actually see the example of mine. Gary has made each of us a personalized little note holder and pencil that he carved, or pen. So at some point when people are going by the town office, stop in here and pick up your notepad that Gary Livornia has made you.
Hold it up, David, so they can see it.
Well, yeah, except nobody other than you guys are on.
Oh.
That's pretty cool.
Very nice, and it's another incredibly nice thing that Gary has done. I will send him an email thanking him very much for that. It's a very kind thing of him to do, like many kind things that he does for us and the town. So thanks, Gary, for that. Then other mail, we got something from Comcast, which is some community outreach effort, letting us know who an emergency contact is at their business, and offering us some different internet options that would appear. That's one item that came in. We received just a general solicitation request from Senior Solutions, not an appropriation, but a sort of blast request for a donation from Senior Solutions. We received a letter from Brattleboro Development Credit Corporation. I think this is, it's the impact statement for town reports. So it's basically a statement of their responses and things that they've done. It's also another essentially appropriation request, like we'd already this must be the physical follow-up to the email request that we already received. We also got a letter. Okay, this is what you meant. So we got an appropriation request, which we'll add to the pile to talk about in budget, from the Southern Vermont Therapeutic Riding Center. And then we got a letter from the State Department of Taxes with the equalization study results. And our CLA appears to be 100.45.
Yeah, that's excellent.
Pretty much as good as it gets.
And the COD was a little high, but still.
COD is 13.32.
Yep.
Does that need, do we know if the listers got a copy of this?
Yes, they did.
Okay, all right.
Everybody got,
Okay, we each got copies of it, okay. All right, so that's it for regular mail. Then we'll move on to pay orders. First up is the payroll warrant, which we're now back on schedule of these coinciding with select board meetings. although yes, there is, there are actually 2 payroll warrants because there was one the week after the last meeting. I forgot about that, which I've already signed, but that we have to record also. Okay, so there'll be 2 payroll warrants. So just a reminder, the first one was back from December 23rd. And the newest one is from the 4th, from a couple days ago, that Mike sent around. So we'll go around. Gwen, do you have any questions on either of the payroll warrants?
No,
Bruce, do you have any questions on either of the payroll warrants?
No.
Joseph, do you have any questions on either of the payroll warrants?
No.
Shelby, do you have any questions on either of the payroll warrants?
Nope.
Okay, then first I'd like to make a motion that we approve payroll warrant 2020-79 dated December 23rd, 2020 in the amount of $11,660.91. Is there a second to that?
Second.
Seconded by Bruce. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of approving payroll warrant 2020-79 dated December 23rd, 2020 in the amount of $11,660.91 signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Then that is approved. Then the next one is, I'd like to make a motion that we approve payroll warrant 2021-01 dated January 4th, 2021 in the amount of $1,853.89. Is there a second to that?
Second.
Seconded by Bruce. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of approving payroll warrant 2021-01 dated January 4th, 2021 in the amount of $1,853.89 signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, then that is approved. So next up is the accounts payable warrant. There is one accounts payable warrant. Gwen, do you have any questions about the accounts payable warrant?
No,
Bruce,
but I don't know
Sorry.
Guy can explain what the property tax overpayments were, because I had a question on that, but he explained it to me. So if
Okay,
anybody
sure.
has a question, he
Yeah,
can
Guy, do you want to
explain
just
that.
go ahead and explain that?
Basically, it's overpayments because when people did their taxes and they had to be done by April 15th, they had to declare a homestead declaration and also Section B, which was an adjustment to property taxes. The state fell behind because the dates had been pushed out. So consequently, we didn't get these numbers. The town didn't get these numbers until after we had generated the tax bills. These people were told to pay the amount, so they didn't go and collect interest against them. And when the overpayments finally came, the treasurer elected to refund the overpayments.
Okay, so there are 3 of those.
3 or 4, I think,
I'm
yeah.
Looking, 4, sorry, you're right. Yeah, 4. Okay, thank you for explaining that. But no other questions, Gwen?
No,
Bruce, did you have any questions on the accounts payable warrant?
No.
Joseph, did you have any questions on the accounts payable warrant?
Yeah, I feel like maybe this is just something that I need to jog my memory on, but what happened with the tree and stump clearing at the cemetery? I see that's a Tanner, why not a charge for $1,410?
Yeah.
I don't even know what cemetery that was, or is that like a tree fell down somewhere, or?
let me look up the, let me find the detail of it.
I think these contracts could do that.
Hang
That
on.
could have been part of his normal maintenance. I don't know.
Yeah, and if that's the case, does that come out of what fund does that come out of? It doesn't come out of the
Cemetery.
cemetery fund, does it? Because,
Yes, it does.
okay.
Comes out of the cemetery.
Well, that's what I initially would have thought, but I wasn't
So,
100% sure.
Well,
hang on. Well, I'm just going to read what it says
Yeah.
on here. So it was 8 hours of 2 men's labor, loading and removing brush and stumps as needed to open up road, and trucking equipment and brush. It also circled on it,
wasn't that the Riverside Cemetery?
removing limbs, small trees, and stumps as needed for road in back of the cemetery. Well, it does not.
That could be the one next to Serbo.
So there's actually a question on this as far as where this is coming from. There's a circled question on it, I guess, from the treasurer, saying, is part of this from the cemetery fund? Can we determine how much, and which was old cemeteries, or whether it's from Fund 3? So, I mean, I'll be honest, I have heard nothing about this, so I have absolutely no idea who.
I'm sorry, could we ask people to mute themselves if they're not talking, because there's some interference?
Yeah, please do that. So, Guy, do you remember hearing anything about this?
No, I know that the Cemetery Commission had a meeting and they were discussing removing some shrubs and trees at Riverside. But the other
Okay.
cemeteries, which are owned by the town, by the Serbo Cemetery, there may have been some clearing in the back that had to be taken care of to facilitate people being able to go into that cemetery. And that's why it would be under town maintenance. Again, I'm not sure which cemetery. Does it say which cemetery?
No, although all of the indication, the only things it talks about notes seems to be related to Riverside. Although I'll say, and nowhere on the invoice does it actually name the cemetery.
Okay,
But it all refers to things. Everything I'm seeing, I believe, refers to things that would only be applicable to Riverside.
Okay, and the
And if the
Riverside
Cemetery Commission is
had
the
a
one who
meeting.
decided to have this work done, then this would come from the cemetery fund.
Correct,
Would not
correct.
come from the ancient cemeteries.
So we'll need a clarification on that.
So this should all come from Fund 3. Because I mean, but you know, the maintenance, as we've discussed before, the maintenance and therefore the decision making on any of the ancient cemeteries is the purview of the select board, not the cemetery commission.
Right.
So this must be the cemetery that the cemetery commission is responsible for. So I'll send a note to Samara and Mike, just clarifying that.
No, we need to find which cemetery.
This must all come from Fund 3 for Riverside. Sorry, I'm just writing down so I don't forget to do it. So does that clarify things well enough, Joseph? I'm not sure. I'm not sure myself if it does, but.
Yeah, I mean, my main question was where the money was coming from, what fund.
Yeah.
So, yeah, obviously that's, you know, we'll see what happens. with your note to them, and yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I see no reason that it's not all coming from the Fund 3 Cemetery Fund. This, as of now, anyway. Any other questions for you, Joseph?
No.
Shelby, any questions on the accounts payable warrant?
Nope.
Okay. Then I'd like to make a motion that we approve accounts payable warrant 2021-02 dated January 6th, 2021 in the amount of $27,460.50. Is there a second?
Second it.
Seconded by Bruce. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of approving accounts payable warrant 2021-02 dated January 6th, 2021 in the amount of $27,460.50 signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, those are, then the warrants are all approved. Okay, let's just talk very quickly about agenda for the next regular meeting, which will be January 20th. I think other than brief additional things, we should assume that January 20th, we are going to be voting on the town meeting warning. So that's going to be the primary agenda item for that meeting. I'm also going to add an agenda item for the town report.
Good, now we can
Because
talk.
in theory, at that point, maybe I would have thought about it by then, since it has to be done like a week later. Any other urgent agenda items that anyone can think of at the moment? Gwen, anything else for the agenda that you think we have
No.
to talk about that week?
No,
Bruce, any other urgent agenda items for that meeting?
No.
Joseph, how about you? Any other agenda items?
Nope.
Shelby, anything else for the January 20th meeting?
Nope.
Okay. All right. So then we'll move on to lucky number 13 and our budget planning. Let me move some of my piles of stuff out of the way and open a new set of piles. Okay, so everyone should have received an updated budget worksheet, which is now dated January 5th, 2021. Does everybody have that?
yes,
If you don't, yeah.
Yep.
I guess. Otherwise, I'll assume you do. Let's, before we dive into the other open items on the budget, let's talk quickly about these appropriations and just come to a conclusion on those. Okay, so on page 3 of the worksheet, we have the appropriations. So unless anyone disagrees, I believe we had resolved ourselves to essentially all of the numbers that are filled in the FY22 budget, we were going to put forward as part of the appropriations, either including ones where there have been increases from what they have historically asked for. The 3 completely brand new, we'll call them, appropriations of the Vermont Family Network, CEVEDS, and the Rural Fire Protection Program, we were going to put forward and warn each of them as their own article, as we have historically done. The 2, at the time when we last spoke, the 2 potentially open questions were Southern Vermont Therapeutic Riding Center and Winston Prouty, who the voters did approve each of those as new appropriations at last town meeting. However, as of the last time we met, we had not received, as far as we were aware, appropriations requests for either of those places. We still have not received any appropriation request for Winston Prouty. So unless anyone has an objection, I'm going to, moving forward, strike that from the list entirely. Anybody have a problem with that? Speak now. Okay. We did receive an appropriation request in the mail dated December 21st of a request from Southern Vermont Therapeutic Riding Center saying they're writing to request consideration for an appropriation of $500 from Brookline for, they say FY21, it should actually be FY22, for the upcoming fiscal year. So they have, as of December 21st, made a request for the same amount of money that the voters approved for them last year. I'll start off by saying, given the circumstances, I am okay with the fact that we didn't get this until a couple of weeks ago. And given that it's someone that the voters did approve an appropriation for last year, I would be in favor of including that in the recurring appropriations for the $500 they've asked. That's just my view. Gwen, what's your feeling about whether we do or do not include this appropriation request?
I agree with your comments. I think it should be approved.
Okay. Bruce, what's your opinion on it?
Yeah, I guess so.
Joseph, what's your opinion on it?
Yeah, I do believe we should include it.
Okay. Shelby, do you agree?
Yep.
Okay. All right. So we're going to add that to the, and I'm going to say I'm going to suggest we table for now the discussion of how we present all of these things in a warning until that's something we can discuss at our meeting next week when we're looking more closely at forming the ballot. But I'm going to add that to our spreadsheet as a request that we will put forward for $500 for Winston Prouty, or not Winston Prouty, Southern Vermont Therapeutic Riding.
David,
Then,
I'm sorry. All right, there was another appropriation.
Yeah.
That isn't listed here.
Yeah, that's what I was going to get to.
Oh, okay.
Yep. So we also received through email, also a couple of weeks ago, a request from Leland and Gray Educational Foundation, which Samara forwarded to all of us. It went to just the treasurer's office on December 21st, saying, attached is our funding request, hoping to be approved by Brookline voters on town meeting day in March 2021. And the request basically says the Leland and Gray Educational Foundation wishes to thank all the residents of Brookline who unanimously supported our $250 request at the 2020 town meeting. They go on to say some other things. And then at the very bottom, they do ask us for a request. They make a request for $250 this year for Leland and Gray Educational Foundation. The one thing I will clarify is we did not actually approve $250 for them last year because we never got a request from them. So I'll leave aside whether they think they got $250 from us last year, but unless we erroneously paid them, we didn't because it wasn't part of the appropriations. I will say it is historically an appropriation that the town has supported at that at that amount. The prior year, the year before last, we did as a town approve $250 to be appropriated for them. My feeling would be that, again, it would be something that we should put forward to the town. I would argue because it was not something that was approved, that was part of the appropriations last year, it should go into its own new bucket like Vermont Family Network and Rural Fire Protection, so that it's somewhat called out on its own. But I'm open for convincing otherwise on that. But I'm in favor of putting this forward, and we can debate exactly how we structure it. Gwen, what's your feeling about putting this forward as an appropriation request?
Well, I'm not sure. We've approved it in the past, so I would think we can, just like we did with Southern Vermont, because we paid it in the past. I think we should be able to put it on now.
Yeah, and I like I say, I think I see the logic in that, and depending on how we exactly present these things, I guess it would be historically the way we've presented these is we show a column where we say what was approved last year and what's requested this year. So I guess in that case, we would show nothing having been approved last year and it being requested this year. It's more how we communicate it. I'm a little unsure of what will be less confusing, again, because we're not going to necessarily have many people getting the explanation of how this got here.
Right.
Bruce, what's your feeling? I guess let's focus for the moment on just, do we put forward this $250 as an appropriation request? Sort of yes or no?
Separate.
And then we can debate at another time how we form it. Sorry.
Okay, we can do that. As to whether we're going to do it separately or a part of this, yes, I'm good with that.
Okay. Joseph, how do you feel about putting forward this appropriation?
Yeah, I believe we should put it forward.
Okay. Shelby, what do you think?
Yep. Same.
Okay. Okay, then I'm going to, we'll also add that into the list and
Down here?
Yeah.
clarify when we talk about the actual form of the warning, whether we include that with all the recurring ones or whether we call it out on its own. Okay, all right, so that's all of the, as far as I'm aware, that's all of the outstanding appropriation related things that we had to plug in. And just to remind people, for the moment at least, and hopefully moving forward, I plugged into the spreadsheet the level funded highway expenditures just so that numbers are in there.
Yep, saw that.
For our discussion that we would level fund it. We would assume things to be level funded now until and unless we decide to change that prior to finalizing this. Okay, so let's go back to the very top and let's go back to page 1. So a couple of things to note. Samara is getting pretty close to finalizing both Fund 1 and Fund 2 for the last fiscal year, so for fiscal FY20. At the moment, and this is by no means final, I think she feels pretty comfortable with where the numbers are, but they still need to be reviewed by the auditors, and she still needs to take a look at it a few more times. But at the moment, it looks like we might have ended FY20 with well, I'm going to say we definitely ended with a surplus. At the moment, it could be something in the neighborhood of $29,000.
Whoa.
Again, that could change.
Yeah.
But at the moment, with the final numbers being fairly close to final, hopefully, that sounds like what the surplus might be. Just so people have this in the back of their mind, because I think we're about to discuss a number of increases in things that is going to, bring up the overall Fund 1 budget. So we have in the back of our head that we also may be dealing with a surplus, at least for the moment, to potentially offset some of that. Okay, so revenues we're all set on, and we've determined all of that. Operating expenditures, as far as I'm aware, we're all still set on the select board stipends and not making changes to that. Does anyone disagree with that? Does anyone think that's still an open question? Say so, otherwise I'll assume you agree with me.
I got a point to make.
Okay.
I think realistically, since we're talking about bringing everything up to parity, that it might be, and I know Gwen went and did the analysis for all the rest of this stuff, but the select board wasn't involved in that. I think realistically, we should at least make a phone call to Townsend and Newfane or around and find out what their select board members, and leave this open and go from there.
Okay.
No, what? Yeah, okay. I don't see where we should make this rock solid at this point, seeing as we're considering all these other different positions. I don't think we should leave the select board out of it. Let's put it this way. Let's supposing, well, we get 1,200, you get 17, I think, right, Dave? Let's supposing Townsend and Newfane are 2,000, 3,000, 4,000. I don't know. We should find out. I think since we're talking about parity, it should be all the way down the line. That's my point.
Okay.
I don't think it's parity with towns.
What's that?
I didn't think it was parity with towns in
No,
regards
and
to
I mean,
select board.
I don't want to get us too sidetracked on this, because I think we're going to have a lot of other discussions about salary related stuff on the other positions. And I guess I'd suggest for the moment that we circle back to that. But what I will say, at least for myself, and I'll actually see whether Shelby might have done this, in addition to doing some research based on the compensation analysis of all of the other town positions, I've also done some analysis about select board compensation for similar towns, because of course, like with many of the other positions, you can't necessarily cherry pick which towns you compare to, because they're not necessarily even remotely close to apples to apples. And what I'll say is based on what I've seen from the compensation analysis, looking at all of the other towns, the select board compensation is right about at the average of what it is for other towns in the state that fall relatively into our category. But all that being said, let's put that last. Let's dive into other stuff. Shelby, before we kick off, I know that Guy provided to us the electronic version of the compensation analysis documents. Did you have a chance to look through that? And do you have any, before we go sort of position by position, were you able to form some opinions on potential rates that are out there for different positions?
Yeah, I looked at what I had a chance to pull some numbers aside and look at similar sized towns population wise, and what percentage of their budget they spend on salaries overall. And basically what I found out is that we're pretty middle of the road on that, which I think seems to be the case on a lot of things. There's some towns that are, way outpacing us in compensation, but others that are still below. And then my next step, which I didn't get to, was to look at towns with similar budgets, because just based on population size, the budgets were ranged a lot. even though the overall budget size, which I think
Right.
probably indicates the overall responsibilities of town officers because they're managing a much larger budget. There was a big disparity just among towns that were population sizes between like 600 and 700. So,
Right. Okay. So I guess here's what I'd like to, well, I'll, before we go through this, I'll say, and maybe this is I don't want to totally dominate the discussion of this, but I have gone through all of the compensation manual stuff and done some admittedly quick, but I think fairly reasonable analysis of all of the different town positions and seen where compensation is at, and what I'll say, like I think we knew before, and I'll echo it, that pretty much across the board, in part because we haven't raised any of these compensations in most cases 6 or 7 years, we are to some degree below where other towns are at, generally speaking. I have some suggestions on what I think would be good steps in the right direction without, I don't think, completely destroying our budget in one single step. So unless anyone has an argument with this approach, I'd suggest we go position by position. First, I will throw out what I think might be a good step to make at this point, and then we can all discuss it and we can go from there. Does that seem like a reasonable approach?
Sure.
Anybody have a problem with that approach? Speak now. Okay, all right. So let's start with, and again, I suggest we come back to select board at the end. Starting with town clerk, we discussed previously, and I think we had, we had a more fleshed out discussion about this because we'd had multiple times. We had a little more warning on it, and Guy and Gwen had done some research already about compensation rates for some neighboring towns. We had talked about increasing town clerk from what it currently is, which is $19.75 to $21.75. I still think that that's a good move. Do I think in an ideal world it should go even higher? I think it probably should eventually. But I think for now, I think that's a good movement that gets us closer to where things should be without doing too much in one fell swoop. So we had essentially had pretty much agreement, I think, on this before we started going further down the list. So just to clarify, if we increase that from 1975 to 2175, that would bring that line item up to 23,744, which would increase it by about $2,100, a little more than a little under $2,200. For discussion purposes at the moment, I think we should do that. Gwen, I know you have a bit of a conflict, but we've discussed it, and I value your input. Do you still think that makes sense to do? Gwen, I think you're muted, Gwen.
Oh, yes.
That's okay. Bruce, I think that part of the discussion we had at the meeting before when you were here at the budget discussion. So I don't think this is completely new, this part of it, right? Do you still think that, are you still comfortable with doing that?
Going to 2175?
Yeah, which would bring the line item for town clerk to 23,744.
Yes,
Okay. Joseph, do you still feel comfortable with that?
Yeah, we already went over that at pretty good length, so
Yeah.
I'll say yes.
Okay. Shelby, still in agreement with that?
Yep.
Okay. All right. So let's put 23,744 in for town clerk for now. Then we get to treasurer. Looking at about 18 towns across the state, you know, it varies wildly, like Shelby indicated, but you know, the median is probably in the $21 an hour range, something like that. I don't think we necessarily need to do anything significant with the treasurer. We had previously talked about the idea of leaving the treasurer at 1975 for the time being. But here's what I'd like to suggest, because I think just from an accounting and budgeting standpoint, our lives would be easier if it was around $20. So I'd like to suggest for budgeting purposes, we put the treasurer in at $20 an hour. Now, what I'll say is that we have to have a separate discussion, which we'll come back to, about the number of hours that we're going to budget for both the treasurer and assistant treasurer, because Samara has a lot of views on that, and I want to take those views on board. She's given me that information. But as far as the pay rate is concerned, I suggest we, with the beginning of the next fiscal year, we increase that treasurer compensation rate to $20 an hour. Gwen, how do you feel about that?
That's fine.
Bruce, what do you think?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. Joseph, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I think it's a small step in the right direction, and then, like you said, it's good for our sanity. So
Right, exactly. Shelby, how do you feel about that?
Yeah, I think
Okay. All right. So we'll table the amount for the moment, because I think we should discuss it in conjunction with the assistant treasurer. Moving down to delinquent tax collector. Now, one thing that I want to note, and this is also for the sanity and sake of the treasurer and the assistant treasurers, is that, well, certainly at the moment, and I guess perhaps at some point in time this will change, but I think we should plan on the rate for the delinquent tax collector being the same as the rate for the town clerk. So essentially, like in the case of it being Guy, like it is right now, rather than trying to differentiate one rate for Guy when he's doing delinquent tax collector duties and one rate when he's doing town clerk, I think we should make both of those rates the $21.75 an hour, which would result in needing to increase that budget line item by about $400. It would become 4,000 rather than 3,600. Gwen,
what is currently, oh, sorry.
it's currently 1975 essentially, because Guy fills both of those roles. So it's a $2 increase on, comparatively speaking, not a huge number of hours annually. But but from a bookkeeping standpoint for the treasurer and the assistant treasurer, it is going to cause a little bit more challenges potentially to have a different rate for different positions that are, at least for the time being, held by the same person. And quite frankly, likely to be held by the same person, even once Guy wasn't doing them anymore. So Gwen, do you see any issues with that?
No,
Bruce, how do you feel about that?
No, I don't have an issue with it at all.
Joseph, what do you think about that?
Well, I do have just a question. What other positions does Guy currently hold? Is it just our assistant treasurer still, right, Guy?
Right, yeah, I'm the town clerk, assistant treasurer, delinquent tax collector, town agent and so
Town
other
agent.
things, but those are pretty much it.
Okay, so
Those
like,
are the hourly ones are only the hourly compensated ones are only town clerk, delinquent tax collector, and
Right.
assistant treasurer.
okay, yeah, that's what I was looking for. And what's the rate for the assistant treasurer?
We haven't got there yet.
We haven't gotten there yet, but basically it was the same. I'm sorry.
Well, I think that it kind of influences the discussion about this.
Well, for Guy, historically, it's been the same as he's had one rate for all these positions.
Okay.
1975 lately. What the rate that other assistant treasurers have been paid at different times is a little all over the place, to be honest.
Yeah.
Louise used to get paid $15.50 an hour. Marie Tattersall got paid $14.50 an hour.
I'm
Other
just
people
curious
have been
how.
paid more than that. It's a little.
Yeah, I'm just curious about how we set a lot of these rates moving forward, because it is kind of a no-brainer, and it's common sense in Guy's case that it would make a lot more sense if they were all the same rate, but it just seems to me to be. I just have some questions about how that works. If somebody else, like let's say 5 years down the road, those three positions are all three different people.
Mm-hmm.
Every year is
How
changed.
does that? Do we adjust the rates on an individual basis, and how does that work when you're talking about elected positions?
Each year you do a budget.
Yes.
And basically the rates were, because let me just clarify the rate structure. The basic thing is that when I'm in the town office, and again, this is a small town, so consequently, when you go into a big town and you ask a question in regards to taxes, they send you over to another department. If you ask a question about listers, they send you to another department. In our small town, we're fortunate enough that at this point, I can answer most questions involving taxes, treasury questions, lister questions. So to keep me from saying, okay, wait a second, I got to go put my other hat on and doing the payroll, saying, geez, how many hours did I spend, doing assistant treasurer work and so forth? It was easy to have the same rate for all things. And the bottom line is that the budget is a little high, because if you'll notice, I don't always come out exactly to that budget. I try to be as careful as possible, but in the event that we have to spend more time, it is covered. Did that make sense? I don't know.
Oh yeah, that does make sense, and I agree with you on these points. My the piece that I'm in question of is certain things. The town clerk, it's an elected position. We're past that, but like the assistant treasurer, that's an appointed position, right, by the
Correct.
treasurer. And so I'm just not 100% sure, and you guys can tell me if you know, but how it works, where if we're paying the treasurer, whoever it may be, $20 an hour, and then presumably they appoint you as assistant treasurer, because legally they wouldn't be held to that, I assume. They're appointing their assistant treasurer, who has a rate set above them. I'm just curious how this all works and how it works moving forward. And again, I'll say that I agree 100%. It makes the most sense in our current situation.
Well, I think when David had questioned me in regards to, the rate, it didn't bother me to stay at the same rate as the treasurer. I probably put in probably as many hours as the treasurer. I answer a lot of questions. I do a lot of research, but that's neither here nor there. Again, it's a small town, and we try to keep things simple, so that we don't have to say, no, I don't do that. It's not my job, and so forth. So that's why the compensation rate was pretty much similar for what I was doing.
Right. So here's another thing, not that I don't want us to have this discussion, but it's important to note at this point, what we are doing is trying to come up with a budget that we think we can be accurate to for the upcoming fiscal year.
Right.
In no way are any of the decisions we're actually making tonight changing the compensation rate for any of these positions as of July 1st, 2021. That's a different process that has to happen.
Right.
We need to think about it now, or else we're not going to have budgeted enough money, certainly. But it is also perhaps further compounded by not really knowing what the situation will be with either the treasurer or the assistant treasurers. I'm not saying this to say anything against Guy or be anything like it, but it's entirely possible that Guy might no longer serve as an assistant treasurer while still being the town clerk and delinquent tax collector. Those are decisions that get made ultimately by the treasurer. I can't really imagine that being the case, but it could very well be the case for some reason.
Yeah.
So,
small town has its own problems.
right. And the thing that I'll say, at least, let's just honing in just on delinquent tax collector. What I will throw out, though, additionally, is that looking at the compensation analysis, I will say $21.75 an hour, though it's very difficult to compare delinquent tax collectors, because as Guy has mentioned before, in a large number of towns, delinquent tax collectors get compensated via a percentage of what they collect. And especially if you factor that into compensation, $21.75 an hour for the compensation for the delinquent tax collector is not a high rate in comparison across the state. So I genuinely don't think it is a crazy idea to set that as the compensation for the position, regardless if we might serve in that position in the future. Like we're thinking that way about the town clerk position. Does that?
No, that makes sense. And I guess the big point is obviously we're setting the budget, as you mentioned. And so depending on what the situation is in July, another discussion will have to happen. Like the treasurer and assistant treasurer discussion. But yeah, that kind of clears up some stuff.
Okay. So with all that being said, for the moment, are you okay with penciling in $4,000 for delinquent tax collector?
Yes.
Okay. Shelby, how about you? Did I not come to you yet, Shelby? I can't remember.
It's okay. Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. All right. So let's pencil in 4,000 for delinquent tax collector. Listers, the compensate, what I will say is when you drill down to the compensation for listers across the state in towns that are somewhat similar to largely similar to ours, our current rate of compensation is considerably lower than what it is elsewhere. Currently, the chair of the listers is compensated $15 an hour, and the other listers are compensated $12.50 an hour. I don't think we are going to get all the way to getting it closer to what the average or even the median might be, but I would like to suggest that we increase each of those rates by $1 an hour. So the chair of the listers would become $16 an hour, and the other listers would become $13.50 an hour.
Mm-hmm.
And what I'll say is, based on what we historically budget for hours, that would result in the $3,000 going up to $32.50. So it's an increase of $250 in the budget to do that. Gwen, how do you feel about that?
Sounds good.
The other thing is, of course, if people have other ideas on what to do about these salaries as we're going through this, please say that as well. I didn't mean by any means for these to be the only potential suggestions, just a starting point. But Bruce, what do you think about that?
I like it. I agree.
Okay. Joseph, what do you think about that suggestion?
Yeah, I agree.
Shelby, what do you think about it?
Yeah, sounds good.
Okay. So we'll put in $32.50 for the listers. Auditors basically ditto what I just said about the listers. The compensation is not dissimilar in many towns between the auditors and the listers. Our auditors, the compensation is the exact same as the listers. The chair of the auditors is currently compensated $15 an hour, and the other auditors are compensated $12.50. I would also suggest we do the same thing, that we increase both of those by $1 to $13.50 and $16, which, given what we budget for their very limited hours, let's say we would make that line item $900 instead of $800. Gwen, how do you feel about that?
I agree.
Bruce, what do you think?
I agree.
Joseph, how do you feel about that?
Yeah, I agree.
Shelby, what do you think?
Same.
Okay, we're rolling now. Okay, so we'll put in $900 for that. Then we come to assistant town clerk. I will say that I found, like I've said with other things, in the towns that I looked at across the state, that some of, are more similar and less similar. Like with other things, our compensation is lower across the board than what that is. I would suggest we increase the rate of the assistant clerk by $1 an hour. So from $15 to $16 an hour. And what that would do is that would basically bump up our budgeted item by $160 or $156, I guess I wrote down. We go up to $66.56 as opposed to $6,500. Gwen, I'm not going to ask you for your opinion on this.
She wants more.
Bruce, how do you feel about that?
No, she's not worth it. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah,
I'm good with it.
Joseph, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I agree.
Shelby, how do you feel about that?
Same.
Okay. So that for that item, we're going to put in 6656. Election officials, I think we previously had some concept that there might be a relationship between the rate of compensation and what we budgeted for this. But looking back, I think we just have been putting in a guess of $400.
Yeah.
Without really any tying it to anything. So unless, Guy, you feel otherwise, I think we should just leave the $400.
I agree. I think that's a good figure. It's basically a volunteer kind of thing for the most part.
Okay, which brings us down to assistant treasurer. So with what I will say, looking at across the state, there's a lot of similarity in the range and variation with assistant treasurer as there is with assistant clerk, assistant town clerk. I would like to suggest we make, well, so setting aside Guy's situation as assistant clerk for the moment, currently, well, I'll be honest, currently, I'm not completely sure. Currently, I think we're essentially probably paying 2 treasurers' rates potentially for the very moment. In the past, when Danny was assistant treasurer,
And Marie.
after she became treasurer and then stepped down and became assistant treasurer, Danny was being compensated 15 for a while. Like I say, Marie Tattersall has been being compensated $14 when Louise and when Sarah initially took over as assistant treasurer after Louise left, the compensation for that position was $15.50 an hour. I think a reasonable thing would be to make this assistant treasurer position, and again, exactly who is going to fill that position and how that's going to work somewhat remains to be seen. But I think we should consider $16 an hour as our coming in off the street assistant treasurer budgeted amount. And once let's just talk through that for a second. Does that make sense, Gwen?
Yes.
Bruce, does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
So you're saying an entry level is $16?
Yeah, exactly. Joseph, does that make sense to you?
Yes.
Shelby, does that make sense?
Yep.
Okay. Okay, so now let's talk a little bit about the actual budgeted amounts for both the treasurer and the assistant treasurer. Okay, so Samara has made some recommendations on, and these are, these are guesses because we don't know in whatever it is, 6 months' time. We don't know for sure who will be our treasurer and assistant treasurer, although hopefully Mike will be our treasurer. And hopefully everybody will be up to speed on things. But Samara's feeling is that what we should budget for is essentially, and I'm going to give you total numbers and then we'll talk about total hours and we'll come back to what it all adds up to. But would be essentially 416 hours a year of the treasurer, which we've now said we're going to say is $20 an hour. 520 hours of a assistant treasurer that is not Guy, that's sort of the doing the payroll warrants and AP warrants and paying the bills assistant treasurer. And then another 52 hours of an additional treasurer who currently would be Guy and down the road may also be someone with a little more than just off the street experience, but not someone who is doing the day-to-day accounting processing of the town. All right. So what does this all boil down to if we work it out with the numbers we've talked about now? The treasurer line item, if we do that, comes out to $83.20. So not much of an increase over what we had budgeted last year for the treasurer. The big jump would be the estimation for the assistant treasurer, partly because we're potentially increasing a rate, but really more because we're probably increasing the number of hours. Because I think the feeling is for the time being, we probably are going to need, we're going to need more hours out of the treasurer's department than we've been using over the last year, if not 2 years. So the budget, my suggestions, if we do all these, if we go to $16 an hour for the 520 hours of the assistant treasurer and $21.75 for the 52 hours, we're going to call it, of Guy, then the assistant treasurer line item essentially comes up to $94.51, $9,451, which is an increase of about $28.58 over what we had budgeted last year for that position. All rolled up, that ends up increasing, you know, it ends up with our treasurer bucket between assistant treasurer and treasurer being $17,771, which is, like I say, up, let's essentially call it $3,000 from what was budgeted last year. I don't think that's a bad thing, and I think it makes sense. It may prove by the time we get to this point next year that this was too many hours to have accounted for. Might turn out it's not enough. But based on what Samara's belief is and her best estimates, this seems like a comfortable number of hours. And I think with the increases, the slight increases we're talking about with the rates, we put ourselves a little bit closer to being reasonable in relation to other places. So Gwen, what's your feeling about that number of 94.51 for assistant treasurer and then reflecting on the whole amount for the position?
I'm fine.
Okay. Bruce, how do you feel about that?
I'm okay with it.
Okay. Joseph, what do you think?
I think given the unforeseen nature of what is to come, that it's reasonable.
Way to put it.
Shelby, what do you think?
No, yeah, I think that sounds good. I think Samara knows what she's talking about, so we should take her recommendations in mind, but I also think we need to increase, you know, what we're spending on these positions. So I think the numbers you brought up would be good.
Okay. All right. So then for the moment, let's plug in for the treasurer, going back up to the treasurer item line. We're going to put in 8320 for that. And then down at assistant treasurer, we're going to put in 9451. All right. Okay. So anybody have a last shout about this before we keep moving on? Anybody? Okay.
Yeah, I had one thing.
Yeah, sorry.
Just from looking at the budget and the actuals, are those numbers are accurate on this, I assume?
Of which number? Sorry.
Like looking at the you know, the FY20 budget and the actuals for
they were accurate as of a couple of weeks ago. Samara's latest numbers I have not plugged into this, so I leave room for the possibility that some of these may have changed while she's closing out FY20. If there's one you wonder about, she actually sent me a report and I could probably see what the potentially final number is. I didn't plug them back into this because I only got this from her earlier today.
Yeah. Well, I'm just trying to think ahead and see. I mean, I know you said that that we're not 100% sure on what the surplus we could be heading into the next budget with. But I'm just trying to kind of add it up where it's all coming from. And it seems as though that just in the treasurer and the assistant treasurer, that's where some of it would have been coming from. And that's, if I'm not mistaken, that's relatively consistent over the last couple of years, correct?
I don't think it's consistent from the year before. It is consistent from last year. Here, I actually have the report, and I can kind of tell you where, assuming we end up with the surplus where we're talking about, where it comes from. For starters, we had $16,000 more in revenue than we budgeted for. So that's a big chunk of what we're talking about, is additional revenue. But then as far as the budget, as far as the expenses are concerned, I mean, treasurer ended up being a couple $1,000s less. Delinquent tax collector was $1,800 less. Listers was a couple $1,000s less, which is not an unusual situation because they have years that they do more work and years that they do less. And the assistant treasurer was down last year. But what I would say, because Samara's not here, what I'll say, certainly the weeks that she has been spending and hours that she has been spending over the last several weeks and months cleaning things up in all of the books
It's going to be more.
is in part because of the lack of time that was spent on some of these treasurer things during that year. So, abatements, we had budgeted $2,500 for abatements in the last fiscal year, and we had barely any. So that's $2,400.
Legal fees.
Like we've talked about before, legal fees, we budgeted $3,000. We didn't have any. The other thing, and I have a note out to Samara about this, and I think we discussed it before, I still show us not having paid anything for county tax, which is $5,400. I don't know why that is, but at the moment in the FY20 budget, final numbers, we didn't, so over $5,000 of it is because of that, so.
Well, David, that's an error because I know that we did receive a bill for the county taxes from Ann Patterson. So I don't know where that bill went, but yeah, okay.
I don't know either. So Joseph, does that kind of?
Yeah, that's starting to answer the question, obviously, on the surplus as the whole question, but specifically in concern to the treasurer and assistant treasurer that, I guess even though maybe we over budgeted for it the last couple of years, it's tough to see what's going to happen moving forward. So, and like you said, the coming in under budget was probably not a good thing that we're going to have to pay for at some point. So, or sort of.
Peter, did you have a question? Sorry, you're raising your hand.
I just wondered if you want some of this in the minutes. I made a little chart, but I'd like to share my screen just so you can check it.
I'll be honest.
I listed all the positions and the raises.
I don't necessarily know that I want a huge amount of the detail of this in the minutes necessarily.
Want to see it?
Could we? Yeah, I don't really want to. I don't want to get too bogged down in looking at your chart right now, though. If that's okay.
Oh well,
Because
I'll just not put it in.
But I can look at what you and I can look at it after. Is that okay? Or
okay.
Shelby, sorry, I think I might have. Did I ask you if you were okay before we kept moving on? Sorry, I'm losing track of who I've asked and who I haven't.
I don't even remember, but I'm okay.
Okay, well that's good. Either way, it works. Okay, so one other thing to note is jumping down to assistant town clerk records restoration. We've been budgeting $1,100 for that. If we're going to be increasing the rate of the assistant town clerk, we should bump that up. I think I looked at it, $100 would do. We should just bump that up to $1,200. Any problem with that from anyone? I'm just going to ask you as a group and tell me if you disagree with that. Hearing no dissension, we're going to plug in $1,200 for assistant town clerk records restoration. Jumping down to payroll taxes. This is going to need to be double checked with Samara to make sure I did the math right, but I'm pretty sure I did. Because of all these increases, that increases our payroll tax that we have to budget for. I believe that number should now be probably $5,147 as opposed to 4,682. So we'll make that 5,147, which is an increase of about $465. So one thing that I'll note, and I actually wrote it down here, just I plugged all this in, all of those numbers that we just talked through and the increases that we talked through, from the select board all the way down to payroll taxes, based on all of those numbers we just put in, that increases what we budgeted last year by $6,617. Just so people know that number if they
Dave,
to know that number right now. Yes, Bruce.
are you gonna? Can you send out an updated sheet like you've been doing?
Yeah, I
Of
will.
everything?
I will.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, I'll plug everything into this and send it out
Okay.
sooner than I have been.
Okay.
So I'm just going to quickly skip down, and I'm going to say, unless someone disagrees, we're pretty much in agreement with all the numbers that are plugged in the spreadsheet, the remainder of page 1. On page 2, we're pretty much good all the way going down to town trash removal. Now, I know this might be pushing our luck, but would really like it if we could try to have a fairly productive yet succinct discussion about 3 line items before we call it quits for tonight. The first one is town trash removal. So let me preface this by saying a couple things, though. I think town trash removal is an item we still need to discuss what we want to do budget-wise. Law enforcement is still a number that we need to discuss what we want to do. And recycling collection, though it will be warned as its own article, is still a number that we need to have a discussion about. I'm going to start with town trash removal because I have an opinion on how we should go about doing this, which I'm going to put out there, and then we can, people can push back on it. Town trash removal, we've historically budgeted $500 or $600 for it. I don't think we should change that. I think we should keep that at $500. To Joseph's point, I think at our last discussion, I think that the recycling collection number that we build, whatever that number ends up being, should include what we might anticipate as the cost of maintaining that site. So if we think that we need to have somebody living there 24 hours a day, I know we don't, but if we had to have somebody living there 24 hours a day, that's where that number should be budgeted. Town trash removal really should be for one-off or unusual situations where we need to go get, potentially some of the costs we have for Green Up Day when we do particularly Ellen Ware trash removal, things like that. It shouldn't be specific to recycling. We should build that into the recycling number. So I'm suggesting that we keep $500 plugged in for trash removal for the moment. Guy and Gwen, how do you feel about that? Does that make sense to you?
That makes sense to me, because there are times when people dump stuff alongside the road,
Yeah.
and
right,
that would offset any costs that we might have for that.
right. Okay. Bruce, what do you think about that? Does that make sense?
I like both your ideas. I like the idea that you kept it separate so we could see it separately, and we know in the future how much we're going to have set aside for that. But I definitely think it should be in that recycling number when we do the warning.
Okay. Joseph, how do you feel about leaving town trash removal at 500 in keeping with what I was just saying?
Yeah, I agree.
Okay. Shelby, does that make sense to you?
Yep, that sounds good.
Okay. All right. So we're going to put in $500 for town trash removal. Then that jumps us all the way down to law enforcement. I will kick off with, again, I guess what my thinking about this is. I know, we used to budget years ago for some amount of somewhat significant amount of law enforcement for traffic enforcement from the state police or the sheriff's department going back. We stopped budgeting so much for that because they stopped offering to do it. I think we should go back to budgeting potentially $3,500 again, which is what we used to do. With this in mind, I think we have to have more extensive discussions about how we would go about it. But we know from the research Mark has done that we could get a radar sign for, let's call it $3,000, which I think, to one of Joseph's point at various moments, might be a good way to get ourselves into figuring out a little more specifically where do we have speed problems, which we could then potentially target as a law enforcement entity. Once we bought that radar detector, we would own the radar detector. So that would be our first year $3,000 expense. But after that, if we continued to budget that, we could potentially have law enforcement eating up that money if we can ever get law enforcement to be willing to let us pay them for it. But I think we need to put something significant in there, at the very least, money enough to be able to potentially buy a radar speed sign for us to be able to do something. I don't want to get into the weeds of how we might spend this money, but that's my suggestion on the amount of money that we should budget. Gwen, we'll go around. Gwen, what's your thinking about budgeting that amount of money?
What was your amount?
3,500, I'm going to say.
So you would take the radar sign out underneath the potential new expenses?
Yes. Yeah. So,
Okay.
I mean, that would, right. Yeah, I forgot that was down there. So that would, in my mind, that would either be the expense of the radar sign, or
Okay.
it would be
For
police,
law enforcement.
or maybe if we're able to get a grant for it, maybe it could be a combination of both. There are a lot of unknowns about a lot of this, and I don't want us to get too deep into figuring out the specifics of what we might do, because we really do just
Right.
need to finalize some budgets.
I agree. I think it's a good amount. I think we need to do something.
3,500.
3,500, right?
That's what I'm proposing. Yeah.
I
But
agree.
again, maybe people don't want to put that in. I'm just saying that's, after thinking about it, I think that's something we should do, but that's just me.
I agree.
You're okay with that, Gwen? Okay. Bruce, what do you think about that idea?
From
the amount of money.
Well, I have a problem with putting it right now if we're going to revisit it. I'm not so sure I agree with the approach that we're taking with the money we're spending with it, but we can do that later.
Well, okay, so right. I guess that's the question. And I fully agree that the debate about whether we spend that money on paying a trooper to sit somewhere or we spend it on buying a radar sign is a discussion to be had. But are you comfortable with the idea of increasing that budgeted line item to $3,500 to do something more.
Yeah, but I'm not so sure I want to do something. But what I'm trying to do is put it in there so that we can have a further discussion. If we keep it out now, we're not going to have a discussion. It'll be just kicked out. So
Well,
I'm in
true.
favor of it.
That's a fair point.
I'm in favor of moving the discussion forward a different time before we solve the budget.
Okay, although here's the thing I'll say though. We're just from a timing standpoint, what I'll say is we're not gonna be in a position to have any more substantive of a discussion about how we might spend that $3,500 before this budget needs to be final. Now, that being said, whether we choose when we get to next fiscal year to spend this $3,500 is something yet to be determined. But we're not going to have an opportunity to really flesh out how we might, because we just logistically, we don't have any more time. I mean, to finish this budget. So either we're comfortable with the concept of $3,500 towards something nebulously more significant law enforcement, or we're not. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
At this point,
I'm not too excited about it. I'll go along with it, but I'm not so excited about having a radar sign in town first, and I'm not so excited about having more police presence. I don't think it was worth it. In the past of the boards I've been on, it just hasn't been worth it.
Okay.
People can disagree with me, but that's good too.
Okay. All right. No, that's good to know though. So you potentially don't want to increase this budget.
Yeah, I don't see the point.
Okay, that's fair.
That's just my opinion.
You do.
Yeah. Joseph, how do you feel about the idea of increasing it to 3,500 or leaving it the same or something completely different?
Well, to quickly summarize my thoughts on it, as it sits now, I don't think paying law enforcement makes sense. I am sort of in favor of something like a radar sign, but what it really gets down to in terms of this budget is we haven't, like Bruce pointed out, we haven't really even had that discussion to finalize anything. And I do think it's a little getting ahead of ourselves. So I think I would feel a little more comfortable just to leave it out. And then in FY21, if we would want to really commit to something, if the money's there, then we can spend it. And if not, then we could commit to it and put it in the next year's budget. But yeah, I wouldn't really want to put that money in there without having a agreed upon use for it.
Okay. All right. That's fair. Shelby, what do you think?
I'm kind of on the fence. I like the idea of including it because I think it'll force us to actually make up our minds about what we may or may not want to do. I mean, maybe we don't end up using it, but having it in there is going to, I think, motivate us to actually do something if that's what we want to do. But I think even if I was for putting it in, I'd want to pencil it in for now. And then when we see how the full budget works out, if we don't love the overall number or, we're close to the increases not matching what the potential surplus might be, or I'd be probably in favor of pulling that out first. Does that make sense?
It does. It does. I mean, and I'll say I'm not opposed to leaving the law enforcement budgeted at the $510. I guess what I will say is, at various points over the last year, I feel like a lot of people have brought, a lot of other board members, other than myself, in fact, never myself, have brought up concerns about traffic enforcement or traffic issues. And maybe enforcement of some kind won't change any of those, but I guess I'm not sure what would ever change anything of those that doesn't cost money. And if we don't include a more significant amount of money in the budget now, when we have issues that we want to try to deal with in August, I'm not sure what we'll do because we'll only have $500 to deal with it. I mean, granted, we could probably find a way to pay for things and then hope we save enough money elsewhere that it doesn't cause a problem. But, you know, in theory, we really shouldn't be spending money that we haven't budgeted for. So, but I don't know what we're going to necessarily do or if we would even do something. And we are increasing, and at the same time, I'm sensitive to the fact that we are, regardless of what our surplus may or may not end up being, we're significantly increasing the budget in some other places. So I'm not looking to increase it more than people are comfortable with. Maybe now isn't the right time to take a flyer on trying to figure out what we might do about this financially. The other thing is, whatever, we get in a worst case scenario at some point, we warn a town meeting for people to approve spending an amount of money to do something. You know, that's not something we've historically had to do, but people do that all the time. So I'm hearing your guys' concern. I'd probably change my suggestion to just stick with the $510 that we've historically been budgeting and leave this aside. If that's what, I'm not uncomfortable with that. And it seems like more of the board is more comfortable with that than is overwhelmingly interested in adding this. Is that a fair assessment? We're not going to vote on this because I'm not going to get into voting on individual line items. But my feeling is we can have a reasonable consensus to leave this at 510 for now. Does anybody strongly disagree with that?
May I offer a suggestion from the public? I just think that adding $3,500 for police protection for our town is a step in the correct direction, because I think the presence of police definitely affects how some people react in this town. And as the town clerk, I can't tell you how many people have questioned why we don't have any police departments, why the speeders are doing this, why the guy is tearing up the road with, black tire marks and so forth. I don't know of too many towns that don't have any budgeted police protection for them. $510 is minuscule. And the fact is that I think with the people that have been complaining and some of the select board members themselves who have seen these speeders and things happening, that maybe police protection is a step in the right direction. Just my 2 cents.
I mean, I guess honestly, I'll throw it to first Bruce and then Joseph to respond to that if you want to. Because
Guy, you're not going to be happy with me, but I don't agree.
Okay.
Flat out.
That's fine.
That's just
Okay.
that's where
That's
I'm at
fair.
with it. I'm not going to get long-winded on it. That's just it.
Okay.
I mean, the thing that I'll say, Guy, and I'm not disagreeing with you. Please don't take this that I'm
No, I don't take it
disagreeing with you, but I will say that part of my willingness to be talked out of this, let's say, is not having any confidence whatsoever that we could actually get a law enforcement agency to come here if we paid them. I mean, we had for years, we did budget money and they never showed up. So we never spent that money, but we continued to budget it. I'm not sure that that's a whole lot different than budgeting a minuscule amount and being here. It's not a good situation. I totally agree, but in the context of this, I don't know how to solve it, and I don't think we're going to solve it. So I think it's a fair thing to stick with what we've done. And again, like I say, if there's a situation that arises or a groundswell of feeling that more should and can be done, that money could be spent on, I'm totally open moving forward, as long as I'm on the board, to either find money that we have elsewhere to spend on some law enforcement strategies, or warn a town meeting and have people vote on increasing their taxes by $3,500 to do something about it. But for now, we'll leave it at 510 and live to fight another day.
I'd like to
Yep.
just say something.
Joseph, yeah, sorry, Joseph, I didn't give you a chance to chime back in, sorry.
Yeah, no, it's, I mean, obviously this is something that I've brought up a lot, and I've had a lot of personal run-ins with some of the reckless driving in this town. But I kind of agree with Bruce and with David in the fact that right now I don't see any law enforcement agency being able to provide us a service that would be meaningful in any way for really any sum of money. And
Yeah.
and then, yeah, I think something like the radar sign, it could be great, but again, it's, that's kind of it's a smaller thing, and it's a discussion I think that needs to be had prior to, budgeting something, and maybe that's backwards, but yeah, I do think it's a problem, but I just think that there's I don't think there's a real solution, and that's why I would move against putting something in the budget.
Okay. I think we're going to wrap this up, because I
Great.
tend to believe that the recycling discussion is going to morph into something larger. But here's what I'm going to say. We're going to need to figure that out next week at this special meeting.
Okay.
We have no more time other than next week's meeting to finish this budget. So here's what I'd like to suggest to people as far as recycling is concerned. I believe, and we'll talk more about this, but I believe we should budget $26,000. Again, we're not budgeting it. Well, we're putting it as a separate line item, but I think we should project $26,000 for recycling collection. And that's without whatever we would decide would be the additional costs of maintaining that site, whatever that may be. We talked a little bit last time about hang on, Bruce. We talked a little bit last time about the idea of game cameras maybe, or a dedicated person going and cleaning stuff up there, whatever that additional cost may be to police, quote unquote, the site. That should be added on to $26,000, because my belief is that merely the cost of having that service in the next fiscal year may end up being upwards of $26,000. Okay, so that's going to be the starting point of our discussion on that when we reconvene on it. All right. Bruce, what?
Dave, yeah, I'd like to make the point that, Guy, it's correct. It's a little over $3,000 we pay to the dump in order to use it. Is that correct? I think that I can't hear what he's saying.
What are you asking? Bruce?
I'm asking the additional amount of money that we have to spend to the dump in order to be able to use the dump is on top of the $26,000. What I'm driving at is I think the townspeople really should know what they're paying entirely for everything related to recycling, including that.
Well, I would argue that, and I don't want to dwell too much on it, but the $34.88 that is being paid for the landfill fees actually has nothing to do with recycling.
Okay, but if I remember right, is that it? That's not in a isn't in a line item that the townspeople see, so they don't really know that we pay it.
Landfill fees, the WSWMD. It's a couple up from this, the $34.88.
Okay,
that's for being part of the solid waste management district. There are various things that you can argue the townspeople get for that, but
Yeah.
recycling, strictly speaking, is not necessarily one of those things.
Okay.
All
right. We'll keep it separate.
Okay. All right. I'm assuming no last thoughts before we adjourn. If anybody has something they desperately want
Just the
to
Brookline
explain-
fuel. Brookline fuel, you have a 0. Is that staying at 0? Up on the top, the 6th or 7th one down?
Brookline
On
Church.
what page? What page you on?
I'm sorry, page 2 of 4, Brookline Church fuel.
We're leaving it 0. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. 0.
Because that comes out of the meeting house fund.
Okay.
Okay. So before we adjourn, I'll just say I'll plug all these numbers into a new version of the spreadsheet. Can you guys mute, please? I'll plug all these numbers into a new version of the spreadsheet and send it around to everybody. I will warn a special meeting for next Wednesday at 6:30, where there will only be 2 agenda items. It will be budget planning and it will be town meeting ballot, whatever. All right.
Good.
Okay, I'd make a motion that we adjourn. Is there a second?
Second it.
Seconded by Bruce. All those in favor of adjourning signify by saying aye.
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 Aye.